You're with Julian on the Brown Note and a review of Eddington. So Ari Aster is firmly back as one of the most interesting directors in America. So he arrived on the scene with 2018's Hereditary. I think in that decade of probably the best horror, the most interesting filmmaking was happening in horror, the most interesting visuals, the most interesting soundtracks. And Hereditary would probably be number one, I think, out of all of those. Really quite provocative film and not been forgotten, I don't think. So that, I think, like I said at the time, that Hereditary, The Witch and Mandy, the Nicolas Cage film, would be my top three of that decade of amazing horror films. And now we get stuff like Longlegs and Sinners, which I both gave like 7 out of 10 to, being held up as these masterpieces, but absolute rubbish. Then we hit a major blip, Midsommar. So Midsommar's also had enormous cultural impact, but for me it's up there with the likes of La La Land or Babylon as a film that's got this weird cult fan base, but is actually really crap. Like all of the imagination and polemic that went into Hereditary, I felt like it was the most rote story. 4 college kids in America go off into the woods and are killed one by a mysterious group of people, sort of the most overdone storyline, whilst also managing to equally rip off The Wicker Man. I did not like it. I still think it's rubbish, and it's got a huge fan base, usually of people that don't like Hereditary, which tells you all. And then he went just ballistically art house with Beau is Afraid, 2023, my second best film of that year. I think I might have even given it a 9.5 out of 10. A unique voyage film, and Joaquin Phoenix has gotten really good roles out of Ari Aster for these last 2 films. Again, I expect if an Ari Aster film is going to be good, I expect it's going to get like 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, because he pisses off so many people making his films. He's like the guy that did Don't Look Up. You know, he seems to lean harder and harder into doing his thing regardless of what critics care. And I thought Beau is Afraid was fantastic, totally unique film. So he's come back with Eddington, and it's got exactly the same response as Beau is Afraid, but it's a very different film. In fact, what's weirdest about this film is it is really close to One Battle After Another. Both these films came out last year, and it really is very close in this sort of modern satire Western way of looking back on, you know, who we've been in recent times with regards to the political climate and the social climate and the different sides of politics and how they interact. I mean, the parallels between the 2 films are endless, and you know, the character of Leo and the character of the Joaquin Phoenix guy here. So the setup is small town America, and you've got the character Joaquin Phoenix plays called Joe Cross, who's the local sheriff. He's a bit dodgy, and you can see that from the off, but the thing that really grinds his gears is having to wear a mask. So the whole thing is set in COVID, which is clever because it does give an easy eye into the fractured nature of our politics at the moment, where you've got both sides just screaming at each other from the abyss. They do make out that the non-mask side is a little bit better, but not in the way that the movie pans out. So you've got that era, and the other main character is Pedro Pascal as the mayor of the town. So you have this basic standoff with Pedro Pascal's woke mayor, who's all pro masks, and that becomes like a synonymous thing for being generative of every other political stance he's got. And on the other side, you've got Joaquin Phoenix as the sheriff, who's on the other side of politics. But crucially, it's not so simplistic. With the Joe Cross character played by Phoenix is not a good guy, to be honest, and while he does have genuine concerns about things like being mandated to wear masks, he's also very keen to just sell himself down the river to any populist right-wing cause that he can grab hold of. So we get this collision between the 2 forces, as like in One Battle After Another, where, you know, the riots are kicking off in the street. A similar thing's happening here. The George Floyd death in America, where the police guy had his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and that caused riots and so on. They're all covered by this. So it's a fascinating world. And I think when filmmakers make films that are genuinely political and not just let's cast Tom Hanks as the president or an astronaut politics, where they don't actually engage with anything, I think journalists really turn on these films. We saw Don't Look Up really toying with the notion of how vapid our media is and how culpable in not addressing climate change it is. And the media, for some reason, didn't really like it. I loved it. I thought it was superb. And a similar thing has happened with this one, who he's criticising and the fact that he really goes for it. It could be argued that this film is, very long film, is a little bit wayward in its scattershot targets, but for me, it's got its own internal logic. There are elements of it where it seems too scattershot for it to make sense, but then there are long-form sequences. Like once we get to the halfway stage, what's coming I didn't really see, and it's way weirder and more malevolent and dangerous than what was offered at the start. The Joaquin Phoenix character, I think, is one of his best performances. I really do think this is a top-tier performance. How he didn't get nominated for an acting Oscar. He's just such a straight... He's almost like this satire, comedy, buffoon version of the lead guy in There Will Be Blood. He's this very intense and has this very... He's committed to his worldview, and if you don't like that, he's got another worldview, but he will use all of the populist right to get where he wants to go, which comes down to vain ambition, really. But his character I found endlessly fascinating. There's a sequence in this film where he goes to the ranch where Pedro Pascal is having a celebratory thing, because they both end up fighting each other for being mayor. And it goes on forever with him just walking around this party, eventually walking up to Pedro Pascal, and Pedro Pascal just belting him in the face a couple of times. And then we just follow him all the way around the house again and out. I thought it was an amazing sequence. And I don't know that you need to express in literal words what's going on for it to be wayward and scattershot. You know, it makes an internal sense to me that these characters exist. And then it goes just gonzo from that point on. I felt like the Pedro Pascal character was completely wasted for me because he's not in it enough and he exits quite early. I felt like those two were definitely the high points of the film, and that I wish that they'd been in it longer. Emma Stone, she's like the good Zendaya. She just turns up in everything, but she's got a great role here as Joaquin's wife. Austin Butler is good as basically the savant that is traveling America and is an extremist. Who's the mum? Yeah, Deirdre O'Connell, her role as the mother who's living with Phoenix and Emma Stone, who's a nightmare. Her role's great as well. So I found this film to be fascinating, really interestingly shot, and virtually the same quality as One Battle After Another. And I just found myself thinking, which would I choose if they were head-to-head last year? Because I said One Battle After Another was such a boring choice for Film of the Year because it wasn't a really great film year for me. But this one, I think, is the equal of it in many ways. And it's pretty unique. And it does show that Ari Aster just doesn't care and is prepared to show a great deal of bravery in filmmaking. So, and I do think it's one of Joaquin Phoenix's, I would say, his best role since The Master. And is equally as complex and unknowable man. So I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for Eddington. I thought it was fantastic. And Ari Aster, you are the man.